Guto, we've heard from Reform UK that their Rochdale candidate, Simon Danchuk, suffered daily intimidation during his campaign. In fact, the party's deputy leader, Ben Habib, spoke to talkTV about it this morning. Let's have a listen, and I want to get your views on what's being said.
But our candidate, Simon Danchuk, was, he had death threats made against him. We had to get extra protection for him. We weren't able to attend the count because of the physical danger to him and to his wife. So it was a really awful, filthy by-election. And the people who work at Reform UK, some of whom have fought 30-odd by-elections, told me that it's the worst environment in which they've ever campaigned, the worst environment.
I mean, that's pretty alarming. I know Ben very well, and I know the people that he's talking about being a part of that party. Now, one thing your old boss Boris did that was fantastic was commission the Colin Bloom report, which I know very well, all about the rise of extremism, balkanisation in British society. It seems to me that if we should take one lesson away from Rochdale, it's that sectarian politics have come to the UK.
I think we've got to put it in perspective. George Galloway is pretty unique. He's got the gift of the gab. He's got a presence. I mean, people who haven't been in the same room as him, it's hard to convey that sort of electrifying sort of presence that he has. And that is going to bring the House of Commons alive. Secondly, there was not a candidate. So it's quite easy to win a fight if you're punching somebody who's not punching back and not even trying to block your punches. So he had a bit of a free rein here. So that's just a caveat. But you're right, this does show a pretty deep level of disillusionment with the two main parties. And the challenge to them is to sort of replicate the charisma and the connection that George Galloway has without replicating the kind of divisive, horrendous politics that he brings in there. He really does go there where no one else will go. And, Lee Anderson has recently had to be kicked out of the Conservative Party. Well, George Galloway makes Lee Anderson look like the UN Secretary General.
Yeah. Indeed. Actually, one thing about George Galloway, you say he electrifies a room, but he's one of those people who deludes himself that he's not bald by putting a hat on all the time. So maybe get Matthew to talk about that. And
all studies show you should give into it, shave your head, and that's what attracts whoever you want to attract.
There you go, Matthew. That's our advice to you, George. But Guto, I mean, where do we go from here? You know, for the winner of a by-election in a British constituency to stand up and say, this is for Gaza, as I keep saying, oh, not for Rochdale then, this is for Gaza. We know there are at least 30 constituencies on which the Gaza issue will revolve. Plus, there may be as many as 70. I mean, I don't quite know what the solution is, but don't you think the direction of travel here is extremely disconcerting?
I think you make a very good point. By-elections can be hijacked so that they're referendums on single issues. Often they can be a single issue, which is a domestic policy. In this case, it's been foreign policy. And again, come the general election, that will not be the case. And George Galloway will probably, as has happened before, fall by the wayside. But I think the challenge in the end is to remind all politicians that the issues that people really care about are the health service, are the streets safe? Can they see a doctor? Can they register with a dentist? Do they feel safe waiting for their loved ones to come home at night? Do they feel safe walking home themselves? And he went on to talk about those things post-Gaza. The message for me from this by-election is that a man from absolutely nowhere, with no name recognition, with no party infrastructure behind him, can actually come second. And he looks like a very decent guy. And a reminder that the lesson from this to me is not to go to the extreme, whether that's to the right, as the Conservatives attempted to do, or to the left, as George Galloway will be trying to drag the Labour Party now, but to remember that the issues that really matter to most people in the cold light of day are those bread and butter issues that really affect their lives.
Can I quickly ask you, why did 60% of the electorate in Rochdale not bother to vote? An election, that by-election that was the focus of massive media attention for months. 60% didn't bother to vote. So is the winner here apathy or disillusion?
That's usually the case with by-elections, but here, again, it is relevant that the Labour Party candidate was kind of defenestrated, or rather defenestrated himself. And so you have a Labour candidate in name only. And so what is the point of voting for a Labour candidate who's been disowned by his own party. So that takes a lot of people out of the equation. But you're right, it's also telling us that people are not enthused other than by a guy who can get them really hot under the collar, or get some of them hot under the collar about something that's happening hundreds, thousands of miles away in another part of the world that really, you know, we care about Gaza. A lot of us watch and are horrified by what we see there. We're also appalled by what Hamas did to kick off the whole thing. But it is kind of toxic when our politics can be so dominated by a single issue like this, and a man gets in who is not only pro-peace and pro-Gaza, which is a respectable point of view, but blatantly is very, and he's done this over the years, very anti-Semitic, very anti-Israel, and I think anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Diolch yn fawr, Guto, and a happy St David's Day to you.
Oh, do you go Dewi Llawen?